What is up, everybody? My name is Michael, or Kiratze online, and I hope you guys are having a great day, and I hope you guys had a great Christmas. Spend some time with the family, friends, get some awesome games, get some awesome toys, whatever you like. Hopefully you got what you wished for, and even if you didn't, hopefully you enjoyed what you got. Also, hopefully you got some nice Christmas money to spend on some awesome orbs in Duelyst. So, because I know I did. You can actually look at my last video. I did a 40-pack or a 40 orb opening with some of the Christmas money I got, and it was actually a really, really good one. It's probably my last one, probably forever, unless some other extra money comes along my way. Because as of now, I don't need to. I have all the cards I could want now, and I have enough to disenchant and craft whatever need be. But anyways, today we're going to do something a little bit different. In sort of leading up to my part 3 guide, or part 3 to my beginner's guide to Duelyst, I thought I would show you guys my deck building process. I love building decks. Deck building has been a part of me playing card games in every single card game: Hearthstone, Magic the Gathering, Duelyst, whatever. It's the best way I have fun, is just building fun, interesting decks, finding different synergies, and trying to make them work, essentially, is the main goal. And so I guess, for those of you who are familiar with Timmy, Johnny, and Spike, the profiles of gamers for Magic the Gathering, I am definitely a Johnny. If you're unfamiliar with those terms, definitely give the article a read. You can type in Timmy, Johnny, and Spike in Google, and it'll be the first link by Mark Rosewater, who's sort of one of the lead designers in Magic the Gathering, and he writes a very interesting article on some of the different profiles of gamers. And Johnny really loves winning creatively, and loves expressing himself through the game. And deck building is a big thing for a Johnny, and just finding different awesome synergies and winning that way. So yeah, I'm definitely a Johnny. And so I figured also for part 3 of the Beginner's Guide to Duelyst, I would talk to you guys about building decks, what the foundational skills are, and what goes into a deck. I think that deck building is a very necessary skill that you should at least check out and learn at least the basics of deck building, even if you aren't planning on making a lot of your own decks, even if you're going to be more of a Spike player and just playing more of the net decks out there. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But I still think that knowing how to tweak decks and configure decks is also a big skill in adapting to the meta and stuff like that. So I think deck building is overall just a very important skill for anyone to pick up. So and when I get that video out there, it'll just go over the basics, nothing too serious, and it'll talk about sort of the main things you should consider when choosing cards for your deck. But in sort of leading up to that, I had an idea for a deck today, and I thought maybe why not record it? I think it'd be interesting to sort of talk about what goes into how I build decks, because everyone sort of builds it differently. Some people start from building around a certain card. Some people start with an idea, like a basic statement or something like that. There's a lot of different ways that you can sort of start building decks. And I thought I would show you guys sort of the process I go through, because building decks is the main reason I play these kinds of games. So anyways, let's get started. So the idea I had today was for a Abyssian Wraithling deck. Now, that, of course, that's not a very unique strategy, but I thought, let's try and make it work, because it's not a very well used strategy, just because of all the removal out there. So let's try to find some ways to make it a little bit more viable while still not sacrificing the theme of the deck, and that'll be our goal today. So when I build a deck, I generally like to come up with sort of a general statement on what I would like the deck to accomplish, and then that'll help you sort of focus on what kind of cards you want to work for that sort of core of the deck, that foundation of the deck, and then after that you can start adding in support cards and things like that. So let's get to a new squad. Let's get Lilith Blight Chaser in there, my favorite faction. So obviously you want to go through each card, because when you're building a deck, you want to consider every card. You never know what kind of interesting things you might come up with, or accidentally. There's some very interesting things that you can do with card synergies, especially in Abyssian, because they're so interfaction heavy. They like to use a lot of their own cards. So in a deck like this, most of our cards are probably going to be just from the Abyssian faction in general, just because they have the Wraithling theme going on. So so first things first, we have to sort of figure out what makes a Wraithling like Vorpal Reaver deck work? Well, the pros of that kind of deck are a lot of little threats that if your opponent can't deal with them, they can have some powerful synergy, whether it be ramping into big creatures or having powerful bursts through cards like Deathfire Crescendo. On the negative side, we have to figure out what makes the deck not work. Well, the main problem that people aren't running this kind of deck is it usually takes a little while to get going. A lot of the pieces of your synergy are inherently weak. A lot of the stats and stuff like that, and you don't usually get value out of them right away. And also, just with all the removal out there, and especially with Vitruvian being pretty much the top faction out there with their zero mana dispels and things like that, it's very, very tough to actually get things going. And if they can break your synergies, you're pretty much just playing with cards that are just naturally weaker than other people's minions. So it makes it a little bit tough. But just like with most combos and everything like that, once you get going, you can be pretty unstoppable with a deck like this, and securing your win is fairly easy through a lot of finishers through Abyssian. Abyssian has quite a few ways to finish off games. So we have to just choose the cards that will sort of relate to what we want to accomplish. There's different ways we can go about this. We can try out for a very aggressive swarming type deck, and using the Wraithlings for cards like Shadow Dancer and Deathfire Crescendo, things like that. We can also throw in a little bit of ramp if we want to with like Darkfire Sacrifice. I think I like to utilize both sides of the Wraithling deck. I don't want to commit to the full aggro swarm type thing, but I definitely want to utilize Wraithlings in some aspect. So obviously Darkfire Sacrifices are going to be in here. Now, I like to just pretty much add all the full copies of the core cards. We can adjust numbers later, but we want to just make sure that we get all the cards that make up the foundation of the deck in there first. So Darkfire Sacrifices are obviously going to be in there. We're not playing a Shadow Creep deck, and I don't really like mixing too many things together, and Shadow Creep's not really going to work in our deck. So I'm going to skip over Abyssal Crawler. Grasp of Agony is really, really good. I like it. It's one of my favorite cards. The early spells in Abyssian are extremely powerful. Demonic Lure, Grasp of Agony, and Void Pulse being some of the best ones in Abyssian. It also, because we're going to be a little bit of a slower deck, and we want to not be able to get swarmed, especially by decks like Vanar and other Abyssian decks and things like that. Grasp of Agony is just really good at early board control. It combos really well with Spectral Agony. Can pretty much clear off their early board in the first couple of turns if we have those two cards in our starting hand. And just can add face damage as well when we need it. It's just very, very effective card, and it can stack as well if you need to have a big turn in clearing out their minions. And the early board control is just very necessary for a deck like this when we're playing a little bit slower, so we can start getting momentum and start getting a little bit of tempo going there. Horn of the Forsaken, we're going to be trying to work with Wraithlings. It's just a very good way to get some small bodies out there that they have to worry about. In addition to that, it can go well with Black Soulless. So for 6 mana, we can essentially just play Black Soulless, play Horn of the Forsaken, maybe kill off something small or just hit the general in the face, make a Wraithling, and buff up the Black Soulless right away. Having that, not only does it make a small 1/1 body, but it buffs up our Black Soulless, so they have to spend a couple of resources to deal with it usually. And Black Soulless is nice because just naturally it's a good body, so even if it gets dispelled or something like that, it can trade with like Emerald Rejuvenators and still live. So overall it's a very effective card. But we're definitely going to add Horn of the Forsaken. Void Pulse I still like. It's pretty much MVP in the Songhai matchup, and again, it gives us a little bit of sustain. I like it. We might just knock it down to 2, but we'll come to that when we max out our deck. Don't really like Blood Siren. It just doesn't really have too much of an effect. You can have guaranteed use out of your Wraithlings if you have like a Deathfire Crescendo active, but other than that, you're still just possibly killing off your own bodies. And a lot of the time, you're not worried about dealing 1 damage to the enemy minions. You want to sort of deal with them with like Grasp of Agony and stuff like that. Consuming Rebirth, it's very likely we will probably have Sarlacc in this deck. I'm still unsure if I want Sarlacc. It's a very, very slow but powerful combo with Consuming Rebirth, and I think I want to make the deck a little bit less synergistic. I still want to utilize the Darkfire Sacrifices, and I still want to have the Wraithling theme going on. But the important thing about this is, like I said before, one of the weaknesses of the deck is because it's so synergistic, we want to try and still have that theme going on, but reduce the amount that we can have our deck sort of like disassembled almost by other decks. So I like Consuming Rebirth. It also works well with a Vorpal Reaver, so it might be something to consider. But as of now, Consuming Rebirth is more of a support card, so I would just hold it off for now. Demonic Lure, pretty much a staple, gives some early board control, good against Vitruvian to deal with their blast minions or jacks, and also can set up for some really good Grasp of Agonies. Darkspire Elemental, not working with Shadow Creep. I like the Gloom Chasers. It spawns a Wraithling right away to trigger Black Soulless, and it also gives us a small 1/1 Wraithling we can choose to Darkfire Sacrifice, which is nice if we want to, and it still keeps the 2/2 body on the field. So we'll do that. Soul Shatter Pact, not really doing that. It can work well with Wraithling Swarm possibly, but most of the time you aren't going to get too much value out of it. Spectral Blade I like. It's one of my favorite Abyssian cards. It just works well for early board control. It gives us a little bit of healing, and it can go face when it needs to. Deathfire Crescendo, I like to add 2 in this type of deck. We'll try it. I've actually only recently just had a second copy from the pack opening I had in the last video. So that is nice. Or did I craft it? I don't remember. But we got at least one of them from a pack. It is a possible finisher after a Vorpal Reaver dies. It can go well with just Wraithling Swarm if we need to. There's a lot of different things. It's pretty much our finisher card, so having a couple will be nice. Normally in a deck like this, I'd probably just run Shadow Reflection, but I like Deathfire Crescendo because it makes a big threat that can usually just stick around rather than cashing in like Knights or Assassin plus Shadow Reflection. We'll usually have a big threat that can hit face for a large amount of damage and still stick around for them to having to deal with. We're not a super bursty deck, but we still need ways to finish off games, especially when our deck's a little bit slower. Knights or Assassin, I like at least a couple. We'll just add in 3 for now. But Knights or Assassin is good. It allows us to kill off stuff, like kill off a Rejuvenator, but it also can go face when it needs to. Don't need Rite of the Undervault. We're not playing a super low curve deck. Ritual Banishing, this is one of the cards that I am going to add in because we need some ways for hard removal. And Darkfire Transformation is a little cost heavy. We'll probably at least have 1 of each, but we'll see. This is the type of card where sometimes you just know you're not going to have 3 copies of, or even 2 copies of, so I'll just add in 1 Ritual Banishing for now. Since we have Deathfire Crescendo, I'm not going to have Shadow Reflection, and Shadow Watcher I like, but again, sort of going along with the theme of we don't want our deck to be super synergistic. We have a lot of synergy already, and I don't want this to be like a dead draw when we're in those matchups where our opponents can deal with our threats fairly effectively, and having a 2/2 for 3 mana is just really, really terrible. Soul Grimoire, I actually might replace one of the Deathfire Crescendos. It can give us a little bit of reach with our general, and it makes our general just a big threat on its own. So I might actually just add one of those. Depends on what I value more. Maybe we'll hold off for now. Wraithling Swarm is going to be an instant 3 of. Blood Moon Priestess, I don't really like Blood Moon Priestess. Sure, it's an almost endless supply of 1/1 Wraithlings, but that just makes the deck super slow. And at the 3 mana cost, it can be dealt with like Saber Spines, Phoenix Fire. There's a bunch of different things that can kill this off fairly effectively, and I don't really like it for 4 mana. I would definitely like to have more solid minions, especially in the early and mid games. Dark Sea, we're not a burn deck. Deepfire Devourer, we can make a really huge threat, but because of all the removal, I don't like to take out most of my board just to create a big threat that can't do anything right away. Black Soulless, we're playing a Wraithling deck, just a great card. Dark Transformation, at least 1 of. We definitely need some ways to remove minions. Reaper of the Nine Moons is a good card to ramp into, but I think I would like to try, and most people are prepared for this type of thing. And I think I'd rather, since we're having Vorpal Reavers and probably Shadow Dancers and Spectrals, I think I'd still like to keep the curve a little lower. So we'll add in I think we'll add in 1 Shadow Dancer. It gives us a little bit of sustain. We don't have any healing in the deck yet. So I think right now, usually you want to just use Shadow Dancer sort of in certain situations when you have a board set up. So I think 1 is fine. It's an extra ping damage because we need some ways to close out the game. But also it's a threat that our opponent has to deal with. And I like it a little bit more than Blood Moon Priestess because it sort of has a similar effect in the sense that it's sort of value over time. But it's a little bit harder to deal with since at least it doesn't die to like Saber Spines and things like that. Spectral Revenant and Vorpals are obviously going to be in the deck, and that's at 40 cards. So now we have to worry about working our minion count lower, since right now we're pretty much only running Abyssian cards, and there's definitely some minions out there that we want to add that come from the neutral section. So let's evaluate on what exactly we want the deck to do and figure out where we can work things in, because right now we actually have 19 spells and only 14 units. In a deck like this, we want a lot of early board control, so I think having bodies early on is a little bit more important for this deck. We already have some strong mid and end game creatures through Vorpal Reaver, Spectral Revenant, and Shadow Dancer, and Black Soulless, so I think that's perfectly fine. I might even want to cut the Shadow Dancer synergy and worry more about just minion quality in the mid to late game. Because if we're adding in neutral creatures, we can add in Healing Mystics, and we also have the Void Pulses. We might even not need the Void Pulses, actually. And we might want to worry more about bodies on the field. If we can just get tempo and keep board presence and set up for really big Deathfire Crescendos and things like that, I think that might work out a little bit better. And I think I might want to make this deck a little bit less spell heavy. So I would like to work with the ramp, but I don't think I want to have like multiple Darkfire Sacrifices in hand, and I also don't want to Darkfire Sacrifice anything too quickly. I think this deck would work best if we have the Darkfire Sacrifices just as a big jump in tempo, allows us to sneak something out very, very quickly while being able to play something else. So I like Darkfire Sacrifice as more of a utility spell instead of playing this as just a purely big Abyssian deck. We're still sort of working with the Wraithling thing, so I think knocking it down to 2 Darkfire Sacrifices is fine. We'll encounter it often enough, we'll be able to ramp into our big threats, but not often enough we'll have a clunky hand and not have enough minions to play on the board, because minions on the board I think is going to be more important in this deck in the long run than having spells and stuff like that. So also, 3 Grasp of Agonies might be a bit much. If we're having enough early bodies on board, Grasp of Agony we don't need as much, but I think it's still important to have at least a couple. So we'll knock that down to 2. 3 Horn of the Forsaken is good. We want it early on especially, and it can also stack if we need it to. Void Pulse, I think we're going to work with more bodies for our healing. So we'll take out the Void Pulses for now. If we have room, it's one of those cards where we can add it in to fill out our curve. It's great to end your turn off with if you have a mana floating, and it's great again the Songhai matchups, like I said. But we're gonna add some healing in through the add in some healing through the Healing Mystics and stuff like that we add, because we definitely want bodies more in a deck like this. We're not like a burn deck, so Void Pulse has a little bit less effectiveness in a deck like this. Demonic Lure, definitely want at least 2 of. It's still really, really important to have. But again, we want to reduce the amount of spells that we have because we're very board reliant. If we can get our board going and have a lot of different variety of different threats going on, it makes it still for our opponent. It makes it hard for our opponent to deal with them. That is our hope, that we can sort of set it up so we can get a big Deathfire Crescendo going off, or just sort of keep overwhelming them with a variety of different threats. 3 Gloom Chasers, we need 2. Might be able to knock it down to 2 Spectral Blades. It depends. Deathfire Crescendo I still like. And I don't think we need 3 Night Star Assassin. Again, we still need a little bit of ways to finish off the game. But 2 Night Star Assassin I think is fine. It's a removal spell still, or just burn to the face. 1 Ritual Banishing is fine. 3 Wraithling Swarms is fine. And I think the rest of our deck looks alright. So we've opened up pretty much 7 spots that we can play around with. I might even knock it down to 2 Voidal Reavers, actually. Since having 2 Spectrals, 2 Vorpals, I think still gives us a very, very heavy late game. Like, these are 2 very, very effective threats that your opponent has to put resources into removing fully, especially. So I think knocking it down to 2 is perfectly acceptable. So let's look at what kind of neutrals we want to have. So we definitely want the Healing Mystics, I think. Jaxi I don't think is necessary in this deck. We have Gloom Chasers, and I think usually you want to either run Gloom Chaser or Jaxi, not both. I like the Primus Fists, though. I like the Primus Fists because it works well in buffing up Gloom Chaser to trade up, buffing our Wraithling Swarms to trade up, and just buffing anything up, really. It's just a very good 2-drop, and it allows us to be aggressive when we need to. But I think I actually can knock it down to 2, because we're probably only going to use it in certain amounts of time. Other than that, we have 3 spots left. I think I would like either Emerald or Chaos Elemental in a deck like this. Chaos Elemental is you can get it out a little bit earlier for the same body, but we don't have any 4-drops, so I think I like having the Emeralds. I don't think we need 3. And let's see, we have a Darkfire. So I think our minions are going to be most of our removal. I might not even want Dark Transformation. The thing is, though, it does create a Wraithling, so it does have some synergy with Black Soulless, and we can Dark Transformation, and then we can actually sacrifice the minion that comes out if we need to prepare for like a big turn the following turn. Because the nice thing about Darkfire Sacrifice is you can destroy a friendly minion, and you don't have to summon the next minion on that turn. You can actually wait to cash it in the following turn to have a more powerful turn. So far, this deck's looking pretty good. We have a fair amount of early drops. I think I will knock the Spectral Blade down to 2, though. And I might even actually knock down the Horn of Forsaken to 2 as well. We're going to have quite a few 2-ofs, which might be a problem. I think I actually don't need the Dark Transformation. Again, if we're having enough bodies on board, a lot of our minions are going to be doing the work for removal for us. I think I'd rather worry about bodies in this kind of deck. We don't want to be too spell heavy, and this Darkfire Transformation can make your hands quite a bit clunky. So I think something like this would work. This also gives us the possibility of just having very strong draws early on with like Wraithling Swarm into Darkfire Crescendo, things like that. But also gives us a pretty heavy late game that we can either ramp into with Darkfire Sacrifice, or just naturally, if the games go on longer, we have some big threats to play down. And I think this is enough healing with 3 Healing Mystics, 2 Spectral Blades, and 2 Emeralds. Again, we're not looking to have a super long games, but the healing is necessary because we are going to be trading and hitting the general and using our face as a resource. So I think this is good. Now we have actually a few tech spots we can put things in if we feel we need to. We can make the deck quite a bit heavier. I can actually add in 2 Spellbinders if I want to. We can have a pretty heavy late game that way. And I think the early game is still effective enough that we're not going to get totally blown out by super aggressive decks. So that is something to consider. Ramping out an Archon Spellbinder on possibly turn 4 or core 4 is actually super strong as well. Definitely requires hard removal. But even then, hard removal at that is going to be pretty much their whole turn if they have it. And even if it doesn't, they'll have to run like their whole board into it. So that's something to consider. There's a lot of different things we can also add in from the neutral side of things. Now, the thing is to consider, do we want to worry about being reactive to our opponent's threats, or do we want to be a little bit more proactive in our game plan? I think we already have our game plan pretty set out, using the Wraithlings as either fuel for big Deathfire Crescendos, or just as ways to ramp into our other threats. And I think we need a little bit more mid-game, actually. We have, let's see, 3, 6, 7, 8, technically 10 early plays that we can do. Horn of the Forsaken can be one also. The early game is quite important, though. Might want some 3-drops. Chaos Elemental is also extremely good going second. It's just a big body they have to deal with. And you can usually get some pretty good spawns on it. Might consider a Crossbones. I haven't really been encountering too many mechs, though. Might even do Crimson Oculus, actually. It's a threat that can grow super huge. Now, this is where the tough part comes in. I think right now, because this is sort of the first iteration of the deck, I think we should worry about just making our plan as consistent as it can be, and then worry about tech spots once we sort of test it out and see what everyone else is playing. So let's see. I think I do want to add some more 3-drops in. And I think adding in the Chaos Elemental is fine. Because we don't really, other than Wraithling Swarm, we technically don't really have a turn 3 play. I like this. This is pretty good. Actually, I could not worry about the Deathfire Crescendo also. Just worry about card quality. But I think this is fine. This is fine for a good start. The curve looks alright for what we're playing. We can afford to have quite a few heavier cards since we are playing Darkfire Sacrifice. And I think we have enough early good bodies to deal with whatever they play early on. So I think overall this is a good start to the deck. Can just name it Vorpal Abyssian. Vorpal Reaver is going to be the main thing we play. Now the hope is that we can sort of have Vorpal Reaver, have some other bodies out, maybe apply Deathfire Crescendo on Vorpal Reaver, and because of its celerity, it gets to attack twice. Well, that can usually be a finisher. So board control early to mid game, transferring into some powerful synergy and combos in the late game, I think is sort of the goal of this deck. So that is that. So that's sort of how I would think of building a deck like this. And normally I like building my decks first and then comparing them to what other people have come up with, and then tweaking from there if I need to. And there are some flex spots, and you can make the deck a little bit more synergistic, heavy, or you can just make it more, just include straight up powerful cards. Like if I wanted to make it more into slightly bigger Abyssian deck, I could maybe take out a Shadow Dancer, take out a Deathfire Crescendo, put in those Archon Spellbinders, or add in the third Vorpal Reaver. There's a lot of different things you can do with a deck like this, and that's why I really like Abyssian. There's a lot of different ways you can build it. But that is one of them. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you found it a little bit interesting to sort of get the insights on how I build decks, and I'm sure a lot of you guys would disagree with what my thought processes were, but definitely share them in the comments. I would definitely like to see how you guys would build a deck like this, and see what fun things you can come up with in Abyssian, or any deck in general. I love to look at people's deck lists, and yeah, we'll go from there. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to be on the lookout for part 3 of the Beginner's Guide to Duelyst, where I'll go over the foundations of deck building and sort of the basics that you need to know to actually build a relatively effective deck for a beginner. And then we can go from there. Also, make sure if you're just checking this out from some random place on the internet and you're interested in Duelyst, well, make sure to use the referral code Kiratze when making your account, and you'll get a free 100 gold right off the start, which essentially transfers to a free pack for you right off the bat, which is awesome. Other than that, be sure to check out the rest of the videos I have on the channel, and also be sure to subscribe and also follow the Twitch channel down below where I stream Duelyst. But other than that, hope you guys have a great rest of your holidays and a great night, day, morning, wherever you are, and I will talk to you guys later. Thanks for watching.